For those of you who do remember my work before I got swamped with actual work, I reckon some technical decisions made by our director in fine details of the technical content his company produces. After the recent happenings, there is a need to clarify that my ramblings have nothing to do with the portrayal of the story. What is the quality of an adaptation of the source material is a question to ponder only a little and then leave it to people more familiar with said material, but never for a second there was a doubt in my mind that writing accounted for reality of the setting, chosen pacing and visual effects would produce anything less than peak of visual novel storytelling. However, applications to gameplay and then transition of its intricacies to tools at the player's disposal is a different matter entirely. To this day, and until the end of time, you wouldn't be able to convince me that our director created an enemy with particular status effects, then didn't give them to an identity derived from said enemy, and this is a deliberate artistic design choice instead of technical limitation. However, times two, this time I'm not here to rag on our director's work. On the contrary, I'm here to pat him on the back. He did something honestly quite incredible. And as the only person in my corner of the internet with sufficient levels of very specific fixation to talk about it, I will tell you why this is quite incredible. Necessary disclaimers are as follows. Comments are better than likes and subscribes. Background video footage has been filmed before the rollout of the skin system, and any in-game description of a status effect and/or logic is treated as written unless stated otherwise. Now let us begin. Today's first identity to dissect is Solemn, Lament, Son, or to be more precise, his The Living and the Departed special ammo. By now, everyone who has used this identity intuitively knows the drill. When ammo potency is spent, butterfly potency is applied. When ammo count is spent, butterfly count is applied. Initially, even I didn't have a problem with this, but as I was preparing for this video, I had to concede and include Solemn, Lament, Son. Reason being, as written, instructions to apply butterfly potency and/or count are written on every coin of Yisan's skills that spent the living and the departed, as well as additional reminder text in the passive. And I get it, in a video game with the community boasting about its collective levels of illiteracy, having a reminder text is better than not having it, but my ever-optimizing brain itch cannot take it. You can leave it just the passive and identity would still work, since the passive tracks numbers of the living and the departed spent and still inflicts butterfly accordingly. But what if in the future our director would want to add Solemn, Lament, Gregor identity to the game to complement his already existing ego? Does this mean part of the passive tracking numbers of ammo spent would have to be copied one for one into the identity? If we do, we're already conceding the fact that Gregor would also use the Living and the Departed special ammo, and the solution, conceptually, is quite simple. Let the Living and the Departed track the butterfly application. In an era where some players suspect most status effects to be 3 different charges in a trench coat, giving some proper responsibility to a status effect is an exact step Limbus lacked until recently. A little interlude time. I did beat Library of Ruina in ongoing early access beta state. There is a lot to like in that game mechanically. Smoke builds, singleton builds, she associations synergizing with Tomere Desperation move, absolute delightful chaos of discard, and of course, ranged pages. Of the latter, the Thumb stood out for their unique approach of starting the fight without ammunition, building it on site with a box of scraps, and then the ammunition itself having different effects when fired. I will call this concept payload. It was only possible because in the library you were allowed to hold any number of skills in hand from 1 to 8, so during the transition to just 2 system of Limbus Company, it was obvious that the director would either have to get creative or abandon the idea for its sudden complexity. So he abandoned it. And it's somehow even more disappointing to me that I can see him giving an implementation an honest try, and it just blew in his face so hard that in light of lack of time for the upcoming Arknights collab at the time, he simply gave up. But how do I know that he tried and failed? Well, let's look at the initial reason for me to discuss this. Thumb Soldato Sinclair. You may notice a pattern, and I claim it to be purely coincidental. In fact, let's look into the game slightly before Sinclair's arrival, as we already had our first run-in with the thumb. Interesting design choice to create a new type of ammo and then do nothing with it. It doesn't replenish, it doesn't convert coins, it's not conditional in status effect infliction, and it's still mandatory for the opponents to use their coins. For all intents and purposes, propellant ammo of thumb opponents is just a reskin of regular old ammo. We are already not helping those 3 charges and a trench coat allegations, and then Sinclair came and made it unbearably worse. Enter Scorch propellant ammo. Gets explicitly spent when spent by an effect, boosts damage of one's own when spent. The skill can only inflict burn when it is spent. Tone Bandolier, for some reason, still replenishes this not quite regular ammo. I've only just now noticed this sentence in particular, and guess how much of all of this is relegated to the Scorch propellant ammo itself? That's right, nothing at all. And if I could dismiss transition from ammo to propellant ammo as stylistic design choice, transition from propellant ammo to Scorch propellant ammo without anything scorching on the ammo itself is once again a pain on my radar. Something is missing, and the reason why is our director not being able to figure out the how at the time. Therefore, as an ever eager giver of unsolicited mechanical advice, I'm going to figure out the how for our director. First, let us consider these 2 lines in tandem. Why would there be a need to check for Scorch propellant ammo in particular being spent if Scorch propellant ammo is the only thing allowed to be spent by the skill? Again, consider this. I forcibly shove regular ammo into Sinclair's pockets. As written, he wouldn't be able to fire it at all. But if I replace this line with spent 1 ammo, I can still spend Scorch propellant ammo because Scorch propellant ammo is an ammo. Those in the know would recognize this concept as inheritance, one of the 3 or 4 great pillars from which the inner working of most of your video games, Limbus Company included, stand on. There can be a question of, but which ammo should Sinclair spend first then? There can be a number of answers, but let's say this is my homework to you. Answers are submitted in the comments section. Going from here, it becomes more interesting, as the second conditional now would only work if a Scorch propellant ammo has been spent, and therefore the outcome of the conditional can become Scorch propellant ammo's property instead of bloating the skill. It looks more interesting already, but I can do better. Let us test burn application from the skill under different conditions. As I look at these numbers, I wonder if I can replicate them if I remove the burn application from the skill outright and instead add it to Scorch propellant ammo. And as I try different ways to do it, the numbers ever so slightly refuse to line up. So I choose the option with less burn than before, to prove a point that I don't care about an identity being strong, I care about it being interested in my very specific way. I could go on and allow Sinclair to share this newfound Scorch propellant ammo with other identities with base ammo, to make them burn identities for a few shots, or even remember that sentence and go even further, but I will spare you this level of complication. And our director has already done it. He gave Frenchman a shotgun, and all it took was a manic episode. These spore rounds have spore status effect as a payload. But for completion's sake and full coverage of the topic, what would I advise our director to do if he didn't figure it out by now? You might be surprised, but on the way to a desired outcome, there are a few options the director could choose to approach the solution. Option 1. You look at how Magic Bullet Otis' ego and Rien Yi-san are made, because both of them have something I would call instant status effects. These are the effects that appear only for an attack or a coin's duration and vanish afterward. So, on coin that spends a special ammo with payload, you can add an instant status effect to the sinner that will do the payload's intended effect. It would be a crutch, but it would have been a crutch in the right direction. The only reason I might not approve as strong as I otherwise would is because option 2 is way more elegant. You redissect the poise. How exactly does the poise work? If I were to guess, it works something like this. Not a bad option by any means, but on my quest for payload, I am in need of alternate logic, and this calls for some refactoring. Funny, but I can also do it like this, and this is what I need. Why? Because it creates this callable event right here, which is exactly what I need to create a payload ammo without an insight from a Frenchman with a rifle. And I'm still not done rambling, because as Frenchman did bring ammo with a payload to the game, I can't help but feel uneasy. Why? Because this paragraph exists. Again, it's a reminder, but then which text is really the reminder here? Are spore rounds truly payloaded with spore, or does this passive track them behind the scenes and apply spore as rounds get spent? On my quest for payload ammo, this is a big question, because on it hinges the answer of whether we truly have a payload ammo in Limbus Company or not. For an outro, here's some more curious on the subject matter. I appreciate that Meursault's mode of firing, whether it's rifle or shotgun, is shown by a status effect. It's a crutch, because I suspect this is how our director has decided to tell the game about which of two distinct spore rounds would be spent, but it's stylish to the point I can allow it. I also wanted to apply the payload logic to Udjat Outis, but later noticed that shoot fracture application always depends on the Udjat Vanguard status effect present. It's already too funny how, as written, Tiger Mark rounds of Lei Heng Meursault could track his activation of Shin, so to not create a similar situation I had to leave Udjat Outis be. Speaking of, if I went to such length to calculate the exact amount of burn to put on Thumb Sinclair's unique ammo, why haven't I done the same for Lei Heng Meursault? Short answer, I'm too lazy. Long answer, unlike Sinclair, who only needed to reconsider a single skill of his, Lei Heng Meursault spends Tiger Mark rounds and inflicts burn when spending them on all 4 skills. Let's say I'm shamelessly driving engagement up by giving you homework and a reason to comment. Here, have a FUMO for your troubles. Wait, sorry, wrong FUMO. Here, have an actual FUMO for your troubles.